It's Friday, April 4th. I'm Jacob Shymanski with co-host Grant Hardy. You're listening to AMI Today. Just hours after the Liberation Day tariffs were announced, experts and regular everyday people started digging into, of all things, the mathematical formula the Trump administration used to determine how much each country would get tariffed. And it's pretty clear that the math doesn't math. Without getting too much into it, Grant, the short version is
Mhm.
that it's incredibly simplistic. And this reminded me of something that happened during Trump's first administration when one of his officials was talking about their idea for replacing Obamacare. And they were pointing out a stack of papers, their plan, and then comparing it
Mm.
to the Obamacare legislation, which was a visibly much bigger stack of paper. And they were essentially arguing that because their plan was simpler and had fewer pages, it was better for the American people. Complex systems like healthcare or tariffs cannot be handled simplistically. You need finesse with these things. Stop with this anti intellectual nonsense. Does this infuriate you as much as it does for me?
Yeah, I mean, it should infuriate me more, which I guess is a sign that I'm getting used to the anti-intellectualism, which is really sad. But I think it's pretty clear they're throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. I mean, even the rates, but also when we discussed, uninhabited islands being tariffed, it's pretty obvious they're drafting policies with absolutely no idea or insight into what effects they'll have.
They're throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, but all they're doing is knocking down the walls. In the
Right?
second half of the show, we're talking AMI audiobook review. But before we get to that, let's get to today's AMI audio digest. During Trump's first term in office, he did a bunch of things that left us bewildered. But the general reaction to Trump's reciprocal tariff announcements, just feels different now, right? It usually you'll see like a baseline amount of dismay when Trumpy does something Trumpy, but it just feels different nowadays, especially from the mainstream media with their headlines really not holding back. Like CBC had a headline calling the formula they used to calculate tariffs and saying they called it insane, while the Guardian flat out called it um just absolute nonsense. They call it crazy. So the
Mm.
Washington Post is staying a little bit more cool headed. They published an article that brings up a great question. Why is it that the executive branch even has the power to overnight completely overwrite the entire tariffing system in the United States just like that? Mike Ross is the host of the Washington Post on AMI Audio. He's joining us from Ajax, Ontario. So, Mike, why is it that Trump has these powers in the first place? Like, how does Congress not have a say in this?
Well, essentially, because Congress over many, many, many years has sort of ceded that power and those
Right.
those those rights, if you will. And it's been done in the past. I mean, listen, so much presidential work gets done now by executive order. And I started
Mhm.
thinking about that in the first Trump presidency. I just thought, wow, this guy signs a lot of executive orders. Has this always been a thing? And talking to people who were involved in politics in the US, yes, executive orders have always been a thing. But executive orders are not laws. Executive orders get signed into policy, and before they're actually enacted, or as they try to become enacted, they can be challenged by people in court. And that's basically what happens with almost every single executive order that Donald Trump puts out there. Immediately, lawyers, like the lawyers, they're making a ton of money, right? The lawyers are making a ton of money off of
Mhm.
Donald Trump because immediately everything's under the looking glass, and they need to examine if there are grounds on which to sue Donald Trump to try and get an injunction, to try and challenge this in any way. And let's see how far we can take our challenges. Can it make it all the way to the Supreme Court? Um, every president has had executive orders, but it just seems really when I started digging since Obama, the use of the executive order has sort of gone nuclear, if you will, and used many more times. And so that's what happened
Yeah.
here. Congress had just ceded that right more and more, and it just sort of became the way, if you will.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at, even regimes that we would consider quote good or quote just, that just started doing things that were totally not normal. I mean, we've had a lot of presidential pardons. We had Biden cut off, Trump from intelligence briefings, which, seems maybe pretty reasonable to us, but now Trump is doing that to the past presidents and past presidential candidates. It feels like we've just opened the floodgates and there's no way of closing them back down. But then on the other hand, I wonder, like, is there actually a way we could have stopped this with guardrails? Maybe one of the guardrails is just assuming people will vote for the kind of country they want. I mean, we're literally threatening to ignore the Supreme Court decision about TikTok. Like, that's wild. I just don't know where we go from here, Mike.
Well, it's hard. You look at arguing with fact, right? Like this is the thing when you guys were talking off the top there about the math
Mhm.
that Trump's people are using to justify these tariffs. Um, they what they did to figure out these tariffs was look at the deficits that the United States had with all these different countries and then divided that total number by the number of exports that go to that country. So
Nonsense.
in doing that, right? The for example, the EU, they tariff 2.7 they have an average tariff of 2.7% on all US goods. Yet Trump and his people are saying the reciprocal tariff, which they say is the number that they're tariffed, that the US is tariffed by the EU,
Mhm.
is 39%. So using that formula of taking the total deficit divided by the total number of items that are exported, then you get that percentage. Is just not factual. It's just not
Yeah.
correct. And the thing that you alluded to, Grant, which I thought was kind of like a throwaway joke, but it's not. Donald Trump actually complains that the Heard and MacDonald Islands, which I'd never heard of before, near Antarctica, are inhabited by lots of penguins, but no people. Yet Trump Trump says that they charge the US a tariff of 10%. So, yeah, this
Yeah,
piece was
something's not
interesting
adding
because it
up.
did break down some of that math, but it also, just talks about the absurdity that so many the Trump administration members, use, and the absurdity of
Mm.
the rules and the logic they use to establish these tariffs, and then convince or at least try to convince the people on their side of the voting ledger that they're trying to keep on side and keep backing them.
I think sometimes we just need to bask in this moment. It feels like we're at a turning point in history every single day with the Trump administration. Just
Yes, yes.
bonkers things are happening all the time, and there's no time to just sit back and say, we're in the golden age of insanity.
Well, I
Mike,
think you know what? I woke up to a post on X from Andrew Coyne at the Globe and Mail, who had posted. He had reposted an article that he wrote. I can't remember where that article was from, but essentially the headline or the title was "The American Age is Over," right?
Mm,
And
wow.
it just feels like honestly, every empire, every age has a shelf life, and you
yep.
wonder, are we going to see that in our lifetime? Apparently, we are.
Well, the Roman Empire was nice, but it didn't last forever. Mike, thank you
Yeah.
so much. Have a good one. I hope your weekend lasts forever, though.
All right. We'll talk to you Monday.
Yeah, cheers. Bye. Unfortunately, it is finite. That was Mike Ross. He's the host of the Washington Post on AMI Audio. That show airs at 11 a.m. Eastern and repeats every 6 hours on the channel. Mike was joining us from Ajax, Ontario.
Our current iteration of the AMI research panel isn't going to last forever either, but it is still open, and you have the chance to help influence every decision we make at AMI, particularly surrounding media production and accessibility. Don't forget, for more info, to join up and to get compensated at the same time for those long form studies. You can hit up our website, ami.ca/panel. That's the place to be.
Thanks so much, Grant. It does seem like rationality in politics is dead, but something
Yeah, I
that's
think so
for
too.
sure dead is Skype. Stephen Scott is very much alive, though. He's a host on Double Tap, AMI's very popular accessible tech show. He's joining us from Glasgow, Scotland. Stephen, would you like to say a few words for the deceased?
Yes, we are gathered here today to say goodbye to something nobody cares about anymore. It's called Skype. Good riddance, I say. You know what? No, I liked Skype back in the day because it was the first time we actually got
Mhm.
real good audio qualities to connect with each other, right? Because, back then it was mostly text based chat. Then you were able to connect with people over the internet. And it was all very sketchy back in the early days, bad audio or, poor connections and all of that. Then Skype comes along and the ability for you to be able to connect with someone wherever they were in the world, didn't matter if they were in that island with the penguins or, whatever else, they could be quite easily contactable via Skype. And you got good, clear audio, you got good connection. Back in my radio days, that was the first platform I used to get calls and interviews through. And I remember people saying to me back then, wow, that person sounds like they're sitting right next to you. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm using Skype. So it's really cool. And it was really cool.
Wow.
Of course, it mostly has now become Teams, Microsoft Teams.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Are you guys sad to see it go?
You know, I don't know that I'm sad to see Skype per se go, even though I used to rely on it a lot as a teenager to keep in touch with my friends from camp. But what I will say is that I'm sad to see Microsoft legitimately not having a very good strategy for consumer messaging and calling. Like as I understand it, there's some things you can do in Teams, but it doesn't really have the same scope for consumers as Skype. The one thing specifically that seems to be going away is calling and phone numbers after your subscription runs out. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, so Skype was a fun application. Used to use it a lot, and in a nostalgic way, I'm sad to see it go. But more importantly, I just wish really all companies would get their act together and have a unified consumer calling and messaging platform.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
mean, I'll be honest, I use WhatsApp all the time. I, could use things like Signal or Messenger from Facebook, or there's lots of different, there's almost too many options these days to communicate with people. The thing was, back in the day, early in the day, you guys are young, so you will probably not remember these days
Mm,
particularly well. I do remember the days when, you actually went online, you connected to the internet. It wasn't just that it was always there, it was always on. You had to
yeah.
connect up and dial into the internet. And in those days,
Wait,
when you were connecting up, going online was. I know, Jacob, I'm blowing your mind here. The
I
internet
literally
was not
Yeah.
forget
always
what
on
you're
I
demand.
talking about. What do you mean? What do
I
you mean
know
I
it's
had to
I
hilarious.
connect
had
to it?
Yeah, I had a
Yeah,
dial-up
you had to
modem
connect
as
in.
well, briefly. You had to it
Doot,
dialed
doot,
a
doot, doot, doot,
number
doot.
and
Yeah, all that. Hmm.
like a
No
fax
way.
machine.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Sorry,
it
Jacob,
was
you're
Stephen,
so
go on,
amazing
go
times.
on.
young.
I'm actually mind blown.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
know.
Stephen,
He's
go
so
on.
young. But you know what? It is so cool because I love hearing that because it makes me feel so old. Thanks. But the thing is, ultimately, it was the way to connect. And it was literally when you saw someone come online, that was a big deal back then, right? You could actually see your friends come
Mhm.
online. You could chat to them. Whereas now, of course, everybody's online all the time, or we've kind of got used to the fact that you send a message and it'll be picked up eventually and responded to. So that's changed things. But you're right. Teams hasn't really been that replacement. I mean,
Mm,
Skype was a verb for goodness sake. You would Skype people. It was as much of a verb as Google is. And I'm surprised that Microsoft never used it more in the new
Yeah.
branding of Teams.
And
Because actually, if you remember, if we go back far enough, Teams used to be a thing called Link back in the day, and Link was the
mm,
business chat product essentially. That's what became Teams. And you're right. It's so funny you say that, Grant, because I was thinking the same thing. They did try to bring out like a consumer version of Teams, but it just never caught on.
I'm
Mm.
surprised that Zoom was the online video messaging platform that came out of the pandemic. How did Skype die after the pandemic? You would think that because the massive increase in demand, that the video messaging platform that has the biggest brand name would be the most popular out of the pandemic, but it wasn't. It seems like a
Well,
huge business
Teams
bungle to me.
Teams was there as well, and it didn't quite catch on. But then bear in mind, Teams was fairly young at that point, and
Mm,
it was still finding its way. In fact, I remember an interesting stat. In that year of 2020, there were 150 software updates done to Microsoft Teams through the course of 2020 just to get it up and running properly. All that production they were planning to do, the sort of general roll in to essentially go up against a company like Zoom, didn't it took a year. They had to really ramp it up because they knew that Zoom was catching on much quicker. And the simplicity of Zoom, and Zoom has got its own issues now because it's become, and Teams is way over bloated, but Zoom is
mhm.
becoming that way too. And this is part of the challenge. What you're looking for is a simple connection app. But I suppose
Right.
these days we just use our phones, don't we?
Yeah, just use FaceTime. We have so many options, like you mentioned earlier. There's a million messaging apps out there. It's getting a little bit overwhelming for consumers, and it seems like nobody's really grabbing the market in any kind of substantial way. Steven, thank you so much. Have a good one. Have a great weekend.
You too, guys. Have a good one.
That was Steven Scott. He's a host of Double Tap on AMI Audio. That's AMI's very popular accessible tech show. It airs at noon Eastern and repeats every 6 hours on AMI Audio. It's also available as a podcast, and that includes YouTube.
The Globe and Mail airs at 10 a.m. Eastern, repeating every 6 hours on AMI Audio, hosted by Corinne Van Dusen and Matt Spears. Just want to go over a couple articles that they will be presenting. Want to touch on this quickly. This one is called New Program Gets Indigenous Young People FaceTime with Major Tech Companies. And essentially, there's a group in northern Manitoba. They started as a dance collective and to motivate teens to graduate from high school and had an incredible rate. I think like 96% of people graduated from high school. And then the founder kind of thought, okay, what else can we do to help people with their careers? And they've developed a lot of interesting services like presentations from different people in careers that maybe they wouldn't have thought of. Even a week-long trip to Toronto where young people talk robotics with Skype, work with Sun Life on resumes and other career building stuff. So it just looks really superb based on what I read. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, those types of opportunities when you get to go and interact with people that are within an industry, even if it's a small thing, just for a day, that can spark your curiosity for the rest of your life. Like those small interactions go a long way, and I kind of tie it to like school trips in school. That's
Hmm.
why I find it's so important to spark the curiosity of people, but it goes into your adulthood. You need those moments in your life
Absolutely.
to be exposed to new things, to to pique people's curiosity and help you like move on in life and find new ideas, new things that interest you. Otherwise, you stagnate.
Yeah,
Anyways, that's
for
one of the
sure.
great
For
values of
sure.
these types of programs.
Especially those people in remote communities.
Yes.
Really cool read.
Mhm.
And then the second article here, the title is Carney and Poilievre have very different ideas for a new deal with Trump. So both of our potential leaders post election recognize that the US Canada relationship needs to be renegotiated. But Mr. Poilievre, he talked about basically a new deal uh, that would turn back the tariff madness, maintain our relationship with the U.S., uh, keep the economic benefits by renegotiating the our cooperation with them, expand it, not shrink it. It seems based on what he's saying, this would be secured by Canadian and border military and border spending, and with the threat that if the U.S. reneges on the deal, they could pull that military spending and cross-border security, which seems really like a potentially very foolish idea. This author is arguing. Um, And
Hmm.
then you've got Carney, who argues that we shouldn't be maintaining that relationship. We are going to need to kind of tear it down. The relationship between Canada and the US is, if not over, forever change. And we need to actually break our reliance on the US, basically. A monumental shift, they say, in the global trading system is going to take place, including between Canada and the US. So, yeah, that's basically their two perspectives. Curious on your thoughts.
You know, something that's come out of the past couple months is this people are really using the term like deglobalization, but I feel like it's getting
Mm,
there because
yep.
the merits of globalizations are going to be put into question again because of this public interests in trade, commerce, and manufacturing supply chains and local production capacity, those types of things. Um, and the question is, like, is there something inherently wrong with the fact that we get most of our things manufactured in China? Like, it's cheap, but it comes with pros and cons, obviously. Is
Mm,
there a world where it's much more beneficial to exclusively use the things that are built in Canada? And to what extent do we want to be isolationist? To what extent do we want to stay local and support local businesses? And my point of view on this is that globalization is natural. It's natural to want the cheapest products, to want the things that aren't necessarily available in your place. I like mangoes, Grant, but I don't necessarily need them, right? I could eat apples, I could eat raspberries, but I get real tired of it. Like
mm.
I don't really have an answer to this question. I'm just saying that globalization doesn't have this fervor that it used to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a shame. You look at a city like, let's say, Seattle, which is probably like, very similar to Vancouver, really, in many ways, very, very similar. And yet, you've got this arbitrary like border drawn between the two cities that makes you, basically not me and some person from Seattle that are on opposite teams, literally, in terms of how we feel about each other, but we are really on opposite teams. We're on countries with opposing interests. And that's always been kind of the thorn in globalization's side, I guess, is these odd team divisions, basically. That's going to be the Globe and Mail at 10 a.m. Eastern. 2 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio, repeating every 6 hours, is Kelly MacDonald, host of Kelly and Company. And Kelly, we wanted to just bring you into this discussion and I guess get your thoughts on, how you feel. Well, let's start with how do you feel about this shift in like deglobalization? Did you ever think something like this would happen kind of in our lifetimes? And how are you feeling about it? I am not hearing Kelly.
Sorry, guys, I'm probably muted.
Um,
That's
Kelly
better.
oh,
is
there we go.
speechless.
There we go.
There
Yeah,
he
I
is.
was
I
still
was like,
thinking away. It's okay. I was thinking about mangoes and how I got to integrate
oh,
coconuts because of Gilligan's Island. Um,
right.
guys, I'll be honest with you. We used to ask this question as teenagers about our reliance on the U.S. Would they really protect us if
Mm,
things came to be? Of course they would, because who would they want other than us as their neighbor, right? If we were ever invaded. So globalization, I think. We're at a different stage. When I was a kid, we would have loved all sorts of that stuff. As I mentioned, oh wow, coconuts, mangoes. Oh, what's
mm,
breadfruit? Okay, could I have just gone down to the store and got them as easy as I can now? Absolutely not. So I love the idea of an influx of things and always have, but now it's become old hat. We're somewhat used to it.
mm,
So when people tell me they go into the States, buy things because Target has so many more items than when they tried Target here, I understand that. I get that because I know you talk about, 8 different cereals or whatever. 16 shows you how much I really focus on how much cereal.
mhm,
But the point is, in the States, you walk in and there's 40 different choices sitting on those shelves in that aisle. I would love to see us be able to have that influx from other countries. Would we take to it? Do we have a reason? Are you interested in some of the UK cereals or something like that if they started flowing through? But I really would also like to see some of the things that our other provinces have that I don't really see here in Ontario. So I think it starts at home.
it's so true. Going to the States just a few years ago, and I know part of me is like, we should support small business, but you go to Target, they have
You
everything. I mean, you
everything
could
on the planet.
live there.
Yeah,
You could
it's crazy.
absolutely live there. Crazy.
Yeah,
One thing that is always stable and dependable, and here with us is Kelly and company. I think we're running down out of time. If you want to run down what is on the show today.
Sure will, guys. Just a couple of guests on today. Thanks to audiobooks and podcasts, we have access to literary works like we've never had access before. Note, everybody, I am saying this to the host of Audio Book Review. Anyway, a new podcast hosted by actor Hugh Bonville is bringing the stories, all the tales of Sherlock Holmes to life. Greg David joins us to talk about his latest podcast addiction on the show. Sherlock Holmes, of course, is the fictional detective created by British author Arthur Conan Doyle, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And of course, he was known for his methods of deduction. Of course, he first appeared
Mm.
in print in 1887. Also, we're talking NBA as our friend of the show, Randy Urban, joins us, host for the Toronto Raptors. He's going to be talking everything NBA. And, oh, yes, might as well throw the Raptors in there too.
Kels, thank you so much for your time. You're always a slam dunk of a guest when you come on the show. Have a good one.
All right, there we go. I'm just going to dribble off down the court. See you later.
Okay. Cheers.
That was Kelly MacDonald. He's the host of Kelly and Company on AMI Audio. That show airs at 2 p.m. Eastern and repeats every 6 hours on AMI Audio. It's also available as a podcast, and that includes YouTube. Grant, that's all the time we have for today's AMI Audio Digest. Thank you so much for tagging along. Moving
Cheers.
on to AMI Audiobook Review. Today we're talking to Karen McGee, one of our good friends in AMI and AMI employees over here. Big reader. I get along really well with her tastes in books.
Mhm.
She's really good at recommendations. And we're doing a 5-book rapid fire review on this one. If you're listening on AMI Audio, it'll play in just a second. If you want to listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts, you can do so. We post on all the big platforms and on YouTube. Here's AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Shymanski.